Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're here to talk about the Troy City Schools Back to School plan. We'll give it a few seconds for our viewers to hop on, but this morning we're going to walk through our plan, what it entails, and then answer questions, some of which have been submitted prior to this Facebook Live coffee chat, and some that we will receive throughout the talk. So we'll also be doing this again tonight at 7 p.m. It'll be the same topic. Probably very similar questions, but maybe some additional ones. And Mr. Fong, who is behind the camera there, is going to take the questions that we receive and add them to a document we're compiling with our frequently asked questions. So in the future, if you have other questions, you can refer to that document. Many of these sources are on many of these resources are on our website, including the slideshow that I'll walk through this morning, the school calendar, the full blueprint that we created for our back to school plan, in addition to several of the documents that supported the creation of that plan. So lots of resources on our website. Please check that out, and we will go ahead and get going with the plan. Mr. Fong, is that a good idea at this point?
That's great. We don't have any questions yet. I'm sure we'll have plenty. So if you just kind of want to go in and talk about the levels, and I know a lot of people are going to be asking about face masks, let's just start right in with those, and I'm sure we'll get some questions as the plan goes along.
Happy to do so. So a couple of operating assumptions. One of the things that we know is that this school year is going to look different. It is our plan, as you will see, to return with all students back in class the first day of school, provided some things occur here locally. But we do expect this school year to look different, and one of the things we have to be prepared for is for the school year to change as we go along. You'll see that our plan is tied to the county level system in Ohio, as responsive to local infection rates. So it might look different. There is a very strong possibility that we could operate in one mode. For example, we could have all students back one day, and then based on county infection rates, we may have to switch to a blended model. If those infection rates were to continue to go up, we may have to go fully online. There is also the potential the governor could shut down schools across the state as he did last year. And then as those levels come back, we would have to readjust to meet those levels. So we have to be flexible. We have to understand that this year is going to look different in many ways, many of which we'll talk about this morning. But we're here to provide the best education we can for our students, provide a service for our families, and care about your kids no matter what model we have.
We have our first question. What happens in the case that only one student from a class needs to quarantine? How will they learn during those 14 days? Online with their classroom teacher?
Yes, so you'll see from our plan that we have to be very flexible and responsive because that is likely to happen. It is likely that we could have some schools shut down due to COVID positive tests and not others. It is possible that we could have schools shut down for a couple of days. It is possible that we could have the district shut down. And it is very possible that we could have students or groups of students quarantined for a period of time. So our plan tries to take those things into account. It is one of the reasons that we have gone to one-to-one Chromebooks this year. If you're not familiar with that, that means that every student in Troy City Schools will receive a Chromebook, and that Chromebook should travel with them between school and home. We're also providing a new learning platform for our teachers, for students and families, called Canvas, which means all of the educational resources and assignments will be housed in that one location, and it will be seamless between school and home so that students have access to all of those things. Teaching is going to look different this year. I would expect to see a lot of teacher videos and demonstrations on Canvas so that students who are not in class can still have access to that instruction. So the answer is yes. They would remain in that class, keep working along with the class, and have a connection to that class and to the teachers.
One question we've been getting a lot of the past couple of days, lunch. What's lunch going to look like?
That's something we're still working on. We have, as you can imagine, there are many facets and problems to solve as we return to school this year. So we have a great team here, and we've kind of divided that team into different subcommittees. For example, we have a cleaning and sanitizing subcommittee to look at what cleaning procedures will look like, what chemicals we should use, what those processes look like. Lunch is one of those things. So our principals will be working hard on that. It may look different from different buildings, but we are still going to serve students lunch. We have to make sure that they are 6 feet socially distanced while they eat lunch because clearly they can't wear face coverings. So there's some work to do in the buildings to establish those procedures and routines. But the bottom line is that students are still going to receive lunch. Even if we go to a blended model or fully remote model, we would still provide lunches to our free and reduced students as we did last spring. So We know that lunch is an important part of the school day, and we'll make sure that continues.
What are class transitions / locker procedures going to look like?
I would add that that's the same answer as before. It's going to look different in each building. Elementary schools are probably a little simpler to create those routines and procedures. Those students typically don't have lockers. They typically don't change classrooms as often, but they're going to be different depending on the building they're in. Certainly, it's a larger challenge at the junior high and the high school. Students typically, honestly, don't use lockers very often. I would expect that we would see less and less of that. My own daughter was a senior last year. I don't think she even knew where her locker was. So students use them less and less. Classroom changes are a significant hurdle we have to solve. It's not easy to establish those procedures, especially with these new requirements, but those are things that building principals will be working on and communicating with staff and students as the year starts.
Will kids still need the usual supply list, or will they be working primarily on Chromebooks so they're not passing papers?
We certainly want to reduce the paper passage as much as possible. We have pared down our supply list to reflect that. Our supply list has not been very extensive in the past and is not this year. So we do request that people still purchase those supplies. Unless they choose our fully online option, then they wouldn't need to do so. But the supply lists have been taken into account there.
There's a big question. Is it 3 feet of social distancing? Is it 6 feet of social distancing? Is it possible that masks wouldn't be required in classes if they are 3 feet apart, or does it have to be 6 feet apart to not require the masks to be worn by students in class?
So the guidance is very clear from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is one of the resources we have used to create our plan. The gold standard is 6 feet. If students can be 6 feet apart, that reduces the need for face coverings. However, if 6 feet cannot be established, then the American Academy of Pediatrics says that 3 feet is appropriate if the students have face coverings and are asymptomatic. So there are some classroom situations, and again, it depends on the class, but there are some classroom situations where students will not be able to be 6 feet from each other. In that event, they would need to wear face coverings. If we can get them into spaces that we can get 6 feet social distancing, then that requirement could be lessened. We understand that, especially in our buildings in the warmer months, it's going to be a challenge for students and staff to wear face coverings all day. So we understand that. We will work with students. If we see them struggling with it, we'll provide opportunities for them to get some relief. And we're encouraging our classroom teachers as well to use alternate spaces, not just to stay in classrooms, but to use hallway spaces, to take students outside, to create as many opportunities as we can for social distancing.
What is being done inside classrooms to facilitate said social distancing?
Well, many things. I know our classroom teachers are thinking about their own classroom arrangements and what that might look like. We have a high school math teacher who provided some mathematical modeling for how to achieve that in a high school classroom, and our assistant principal went into some classrooms and looked at hexagonal classroom seating spacing, which is just a different way of placing desks in the room, and they were actually able to get more desks in the room based on that seating pattern. So this is one of the first thoughts on people's minds as we face a return to school and what that might look like in their individual spaces. As you can imagine, we have classrooms of all different sizes and shapes across the district, so it might look different for different teachers, but we're working with them to provide those guidelines and help them figure out what it looks like in their classrooms.
What is planned for training / showing parents how to utilize the online option, and when will students be able to pick up the Chromebook?
We don't have firm dates for that yet. We are looking at the end of August, possibly having students come into school for some diagnostic testing and also orientation to their building, to some of those procedures, and then that's when they would pick up their Chromebooks. So they would have them before the first day of instruction. Training, we have a lot of training to do with staff, with the use of Canvas, with how instruction will look different this year based on these different models, on how our one-to-one Chromebook program will work. So there's a significant amount of professional development we have to schedule and establish for this coming school year before classes start.
Will junior high and high school switch classes? Yes, they will. How will you limit the spread? Johnny gives it to Sally in first period, and then Sally gives it to Jane in the fifth period. How is this tracked and spread prevented?
So our procedures are designed so that we will help reduce the chance of spread. And those two most important components are the social distancing and the face coverings. Those are two things that we know mitigate the risk of spread. So that's why those are a part of our plan. I think the second part of that question is what would happen if students were COVID positive. In that event, the Miami County Public Health would take over and they would do some contact tracing. So they would talk to teachers and students who were around that student and try to figure out who should be quarantined. What I've heard directly from Miami County Public Health is it's the standard is if you have been within 6 feet of a person for 15 minutes or more, you're a candidate for quarantine. So again, that is not a hard and fast rule. If you are near a student 8 feet away, there's a potential that could also happen, but the standard I've heard so far is 15 minutes, 6 feet or less.
What happens when a middle schooler figures out to say their throat hurts? Don't you think that's going to a ripple effect to get students out of school 14 days at home if they say they have a sore throat?
Well, those things already happen. We have our clinics are pretty busy throughout the regular school year. We do expect them to be busier, but we will train staff in how to understand and recognize COVID symptoms. We will work closely with families and advise them on the steps they should take if their child is displaying symptoms of COVID, including a temperature. And we'll just work closely with families and physicians to accommodate those things.
If ELS parents decide to enroll their children in the Troy Online Academy, how can they support their children if they can't speak English themselves?
We have translators in the district that help with those hurdles with parents. We will do everything we can to serve all of our students regardless of their special needs. We know that 3 of our target populations that we have to strongly consider are gifted students, our English language learners, and our students with disabilities. We have to really provide a personalized education for all of our students in any given year, and that is no less important this year. It may be a larger challenge for us, but we still need to do that, and that's something we're going to be working diligently on.
Here's another question regarding masks. You've asked some of these. You said they will get breaks when possible. Will they have to wear them on the playground? What happens if they're not comfortable / hot, etc., and they pull it down? Will they be disciplined?
We received some questions about discipline in the past, and it is not our goal to discipline students for not wearing a face covering. Again, we do understand that this is a new, it's a shift, that people have to adjust to it, and it is never our intention to come into it with a mind frame of how we're going to discipline people for not following the rules. Of course, there is an element that students do need to respect the rules we have in place and follow those guidelines, and that's going to look, again, different depending on the age group. High school students can understand that and follow that a little easier maybe than our elementary students. So the other part of that question was about the playground. The playground is one of those opportunities where we hope the students can get some social distancing and find some relief. And it depends on what they're doing. If they are swinging in a swing or playing on a monkey bar and they can be 6 feet away from someone, then they don't need to wear the face covering. If they want to be in a group of students all sitting close together, we would have to encourage them to sit apart and or wear their face covering. So it's going to depend on what activity the students are engaged in.
There's a question about a 9th grade student in the marching band in the online academy. Just talk about extracurricular activities in general and how will they be affected by online academy.
Yeah, they won't be affected by the online academy. If any parent chooses to have their child attend the Troy Virtual Academy, those students still have the same opportunities for extracurriculars that anyone else does, whether they're athletics or co-curriculars. So nothing would be inaccessible to them. There may be some hurdles for parents on how to get them here for transportation, for practices and those things, but students could still participate in all of those things.
Is there a list of classes or courses that are being offered online to students?
Not at this point. The reason is that it's somewhat driven by numbers. We have to see how many students are interested in taking a particular subject before we can know if that can be offered or not. And that's the same process we go through when we do the high school scheduling. We can't offer, I'll make something up, we can't offer an AP English literature course if we only have one student that wants to take it. We just can't staff that. So it's going to be somewhat driven by numbers. It could look very different for different kinds of students. There's a potential that students could come into the high school and take certain classes that cannot be offered online and take other core classes online. It could be that they have access to a different learning platform where classes look a little different than they would in the normal high school. What we need to do is get the list of, and when parents and students make this choice about the Troy Virtual Academy, I wouldn't imagine that it should be driven by the course offerings. The question is, what is their comfort level? What are their concerns about being in school and following these guidelines in a COVID era? So that should be their driving, deciding factor when choosing the Troy Virtual Academy, not what courses are offered, but what is their level of comfort. Do they want to choose that option to protect the safety and health of their family, or do they want to choose that for a different reason?
Talk about busing.
We will still bus our students. It is a challenge for the district to establish that. So one thing, we need parents to be our partners in this process, and for any parent who can transport their child to school, we would ask that they do that. It helps us achieve social distancing on buses. We don't want to have more than 2 students in a seat on a bus unless they're in the same family. So some of our buses last year did run with more students than that on it. So we will have to look at how many students are on those buses, on those routes, and it may be that we have to send buses out to pick some students up a little later than others just to achieve that social distancing. But we can't have more than 2 students on a bus seat. So the more parents that could help with bringing their children to school, the easier that would be for us to accomplish that. It's not a requirement. We're still going to bus our students, but that just helps relieve some of that pressure and some of that population on the bus.
Will you require quarantine for student with a temperature, or only those students that test positive for COVID?
So we won't be requiring the quarantine. That will be directed and led by the Miami County Public Health Department. We'll work very closely with them throughout this year to identify, and it's very likely that they will know anyone who tests positive for COVID before we will, and they'll begin that contact tracing.
We will be providing Chromebooks for each student. That's a question I can answer. With having Chromebooks, do we as parents need to buy cases so that they can get them to and from school every day?
I would advise parents to have something for their children to get them to school every day. Backpacks are fine. Many of our students have backpacks. Chromebooks are relatively small, so they should fit easily into a backpack. There are separate cases out there that parents could purchase if they wanted to, but I think a backpack would be just fine.
Talk a little bit about special education and what we hope to do with those classes.
Well, special education, any student with special needs of that sort receives an individualized education plan, an IEP, and that is never more important than it is this year. So again, going back to that idea that learning should be personalized for all of our students, particularly our students with special needs, we're going to need to work closely with them and their families, as we do every year. We're required by law to do that, and it's also good practice to look at each individual student, what their needs are, and then how can we meet that need through whatever platform or learning model we're looking at, whether it's fully online, whether it's in person. Certainly, those kinds of services are easier when students are in person, but it's still our duty to educate our students, and we will figure out how to do that in an online model or an in-person model.
Could you talk about some of the specifics that you're looking for in face masks, over the nose and mouth, etc., prohibited designs, and will the district provide masks?
The district will not provide masks for normal daily use. The district will provide disposable face coverings for students who may forget them. So, for example, when a bus pulls up to a bus stop and a student, especially a young student, is standing on the curb waiting to get on the bus, they should have a face covering with them. I think all of us in society these days probably have many of them, and if we don't, we should get them. But if a student has forgotten theirs, we're not going to leave them on the curb. We're going to hand them a disposable mask and ask them to wear that throughout the day. The next day, they should bring their face covering. The particulars of a face mask, they should cover the nose and mouth. They should follow all of our other dress code rules in terms of they can't have obscene things written on them. They need to be appropriate. They need to follow the spirit of the rules. So if someone comes with a mesh face mask, that would not be appropriate. We face these kinds of challenges all the time when it comes to our dress code, and we work through them. And I think we all have a common understanding of what a shirt is, and a face covering really should be no different.
How lunch and recess work, we would ask you to refer to earlier in the video. We'll also have that in the FAQ that we get from this. Is online learning going to be flexible for parents who work from 8 to 5?
Yes, we're looking at a couple of different models for parents, and we understand that parents have different schedules and different challenges with that. So one parent may have the ability to do that coaching and help with instruction in the morning. Another may have that ability in the evening. One of the challenge is finding a schedule that works for everyone, and that may be extremely difficult. But we want to establish common times in the morning or in the afternoon that students would be able to have live interaction with their teacher. Many of the resources that students would use to learn would be able to be accessed at any time. So whether they're demonstration videos, teacher recorded videos, different web links, different documents, all of those will be accessible at any time. But we also need to make sure we provide that time, that live time for students to interface and interact with their teachers and with their classmates.
Will 8th grade students going to school online have 8th grade teachers as their online teachers?
All of our students will have teachers who are appropriate licensed. We have some teachers who are assigned to 8th grade. We have some that are assigned to multiple grade levels. But all of our students will have teachers that are appropriately licensed.
How much time before school starts will teachers have to learn the Canvas system and build their curriculum?
We're going to start providing those resources and access to teachers, I believe, beginning this week. There are some links that we're going to send teachers to show them what Canvas is and how to think about it with their instruction. And then we'll have some more specific professional development for teachers as we get into the middle of August. Canvas is, one of the benefits of Canvas, it's a very user-friendly platform for teachers, students, and families. So I don't anticipate a huge learning curve for our staff to get that going. It's also very intuitive and very connected to PowerSchool and to our student information system.
For those who don't know, we will not be, per American Pediatric Society, requiring masks of students in grades K through 2, but will those students be required to wear masks in common areas, especially when they're around students in grades 3 through 6 or 8 or what have you?
We recommend that students in kindergarten through 2nd grade wear face coverings, but we won't require that in classrooms, common areas, or anywhere. We recommend them, but some students struggle with them more and increase their face touching to a degree that kind of defeats the purpose of having a face covering. And again, as you mentioned, that's directly from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Does a student need to use the school-issued Chromebook for online learning, or are they able to use their home computer? I think our technology director, Eric Sweetman, had said that he would that because of certain programs and testing that we use, they'll need to use the Chromebook that the school provides.
They can certainly use their home computer. All of these things will be able to be accessed via the web or the cloud, so they'll have access to all those on any computer. The benefit of our Chromebooks, as you mentioned, that they're able to be used for school testing. Also, they have all the appropriate filters in place to protect our students and their virtual life.
Currently, 1st and 2nd graders aren't required to wear a mask, and kindergartners as well. If a K through 2 student tests positive, will that change the mask requirement?
Again, following the advice of the American Academy of Pediatrics, we won't require face coverings for students in those grade levels. We highly recommend them, and we ask that parents work with their child to learn how to go about their daily life with a face covering, but we will not require them.
Talk about elementary students and the specials, art, music, gym, etc. at the elementary level. How will that look, especially moving between the classrooms in the elementary buildings?
That's one of the things we're working with our department heads and teachers on, is what those schedules might look like. One of the challenges with providing those types of opportunities for our students is the travel in the classroom. We know that it is safer and reduces the risk of spread if we keep students localized to a particular classroom all day. However, that might be difficult, especially for our younger learners, to be in a single classroom all day. So we're trying to balance those safety concerns with the need to go to different places, to go to the lunchroom, to go to recess, to go to an art room, to go to a music room. It certainly is a challenge that we're working our way through. And again, our different elementary schools have different numbers of students, are staffed differently, so how they deliver those in different buildings looks different. We won't have a one-size-fits-all approach across Troy City schools. We'll have to work with our individual teachers and principals to establish those.
How, if we were to go at level 3 to hybrid learning, how would we divide our students into red and gray groups for hybrid schooling?
One of the things we're going to work on this week is looking at a list of our students and drawing a line that would approximately divide them into half, so that we could have an equal number of students on the red group and the gray group. Now, when we do that, we do also know that there are some students that live in the same household that have different last names. So we want to make sure that all of the students in a particular household are in the same group. So it won't just be cut and dry, A through L, for example. we'll have to also accommodate those students with different last names in the same household.
K through 2 will not be. Oh, I'm sorry.
And we're going to communicate those lists soon, along with that calendar, so that parents will know. Okay, if we do go to level 3, which I still need to get through our plan here, if we go to level 3, they would know immediately which group their child would be in before the school year even starts.
K through 2 will not be required wearing masks. That's correct. It's recommended but not required. If a child is sent home sick, will a negative COVID test be required in order to return to school?
I don't believe a negative COVID test is required. I'm trying to recall exactly how that is written in our guidance document, but that is on our guidance document. Again, we work closely with Miami County Public Health. We would recommend that parents see a family physician or call someone to share their concerns about whatever symptoms their child may have. But there are a couple of different levels. If they are asymptomatic, they can return to school. It's in our written guidelines.
Over the weekend, the CDC actually mentioned, I had seen this somewhere as well, a 10-day quarantine as opposed to a 14-day quarantine. Is there any chance our number of quarantine days will change, or is that something that the health department will decide?
Again, quarantine lengths and who would be quarantined are determined by Miami County Public Health. If their guidelines change, we would, again, those are their guidelines.
Right. Well, because there's a lot of questions regarding this. We'll emphasize again that quarantine length and whether there's a quarantine at all will be determined by Miami County Health.
I'm going to try to go to another slide.
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So let's because not all of people on Facebook may know what our plan is. So let's
Correct.
get to that. So our plan is such. So it is tied to the county level system that is across the state of Ohio. Miami County is currently in a level 2. So if we are in a level 1 or a level 2, then we would have Plan A in effect, which is all students in school every day with face coverings, as much social distancing as possible. If the county were to move to level 3, then we would switch to our B plan, which is our blended learning model. That model would basically divide the students into 2 equal groups. One group of students would attend school in person Monday and Tuesday. The other group of students would attend school in person Thursday and Friday. And the other 3 days of the week, those students would have access to online learning in connection with their teachers. That's the blended model. That allows us to achieve more social distancing with half of the students in school, on buses, and in classrooms. And if we went to level 4, certainly hope we don't do that, but if we go to level 4, then we would go to fully remote learning. At this point, no county in Ohio is at level 4, and we hope that we don't get there.
More questions. Face shields versus face masks.
Face shields are not a substitute for face coverings. That is directly from the health department. They don't contain the vapor particles that a face covering does. There are times when staff members are required to wear face coverings, but there are times for some teachers when a face shield would be a substitute. Not that they're a substitute for the face covering, but there are times that students need to see the teacher's mouth move. If it's an English language learner, if they're working on phonics lessons. So there will be times when teachers wear face shields instead of face coverings, but there are some limited criteria to establish that. Bus drivers are another example. If bus drivers wear glasses, sometimes face coverings can cause the glasses to fog up. So that could be a safety hazard while driving a bus. So that bus driver may wear a face shield. But any staff member who is going to wear a face shield has to have a documented reason on file with us. But they are not a substitute for face coverings because they just don't have the same level of protection from airborne particles.
I can answer this. Students in grades K through 2 are not required to wear a mask, but they are certainly welcome to wear a mask, and we actually even recommend they wear a mask in certain cases, but definitely not. They're allowed to, but they're not required to. I'm not sure what the question is exactly. Students who are attending the Career Center.
The Career Center, last I knew, is still working on their plan, so any students who are attending our Career Center will follow that plan. If they attend the Career Center as opposed to Troy High School, they will follow that plan. We will still transport those students, but they will follow that plan.
When a teacher tests positive, will they need to self-quarantine? Again, that would be a health department situation.
Yes, if a teacher is positive, it really wouldn't be a self-quarantine, it would be a directed quarantine from the Miami County Public Health, yes.
Will there be a dedicated special needs bus?
We don't have any intentions to change any of our bus routes at this point. I don't believe we don't run very many special education routes currently. Those probably would remain the same. Whatever the need is for us to transport students, we will meet that need.
Are some teachers being dedicated to online teaching and others to do in-person teaching, or are teachers expected to do both simultaneously?
Teachers won't be asked to teach students in their classes throughout the day and then go home in the evening and to teach students online in the evening. So particularly in the elementary schools, it's our intention to assign teachers to online learning. Those will be driven by the number of students that sign up for those. At the high school, it becomes a little more challenging at the high school with the high school schedule, but again, it's going to be driven by numbers. So if we have many high school students sign up for online learning, then we would have high school teachers dedicated to teach those courses. If it's lower numbers, then we would have, could possibly have teachers that have a few in-person sections and a few online sections in their schedule.
I think they're looking online and they see the sample schedules that we had posted on our part of our blueprint. I see a morning schedule and an afternoon schedule for online schooling. Will we have a choice? That's
for the parents?
Yes, I think that they're looking at the schedules that were kind of more an example.
Yes, they would have a choice because those schedules were developed understanding that parents have more ability. Some parents have more ability in the morning to help with support instruction. Some have a greater ability in the afternoon. So those are just a couple of sample schedules we created to help parents understand what learning might look like in that online academy.
The times of online classes are not ideal for younger kids. How long will a student be expected to sit in front of a computer for online learning? Will they be expected to sit there for 5 hours?
No, we certainly don't expect a student to sit in front of a computer for 5 straight hours. The learning that will happen online can happen synchronously or asynchronously, and that means that there are times that we need to establish where students have direct contact with their teacher to help explain how to do problems they don't understand or how to coach them through whatever project they may be working on. So there's certainly a need to establish those times where teachers can connect directly with their students. But the other learning can happen asynchronously, meaning that a student can access the resources whenever they want. So if they wanted to work on it for a half hour, then take a break, they could do that, come back to it for an hour. Those parts would be very flexible. The parts that have to be scheduled are that direct teacher connection.
If a student has allergies that lead to sinus drainage and a cough and are sent home, so basically if a student has some of the symptoms of COVID and are sent home from school, are they required to see a doctor to rule out COVID?
No. We have trained medical professionals in all of our buildings. We have licensed nurse practitioners and registered nurses in all of our buildings. So they will be trained in how to identify symptoms of COVID, and they will be able to differentiate. If they have questions or believe that a student should contact a family physician, then they would recommend that to the parent.
What about outside school activities such as football games? Will students be required to wear masks?
If students are on school grounds and cannot maintain 6 feet social distancing, they would be required to wear face coverings. Not just students, everyone.
Again, face shields are not a substitute for face masks.
Right.
Why are only certain grades required to wear masks? That's from the American Pediatric Society recommendation. Explain why. Why K through 2 does not have to wear masks because of the face touching and such.
Well, I would encourage anyone watching to look at the documents we have online that help create our plan. There are 3 that we have referred to extensively, one being from the Ohio Department of Education, another being from the Ohio Department of Health, and the third being from the American Academy of Pediatrics. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, and again, that document is online for people to check out, suggests and recommends that students who are in grades 3 and above, and that is also supported by the Ohio Department of Health, are strongly encouraged to wear face coverings, and in our case are required to do so. Students who are younger sometimes struggle with that face covering and end up touching their face so much that it becomes a detriment to them to wear the face covering because of the face touching as opposed to the benefit of having it on. So again, for students in kindergarten through 2nd grade, we highly recommend that they wear that, and we would ask parents to work with their children to help their children acclimate to that because it is good for those students to wear those if they don't touch their face too often.
We're asking students to do one semester at a time for online for the online academy versus in-person learning. If they decide after the first semester they did online academy, they want to go back to in-person learning for the second semester, how easy will that transition be? How easy are you going to make it for parents to do that?
I think it would be very easy for parents and it would be very difficult for us to figure out how to do that, but that's one of the things we have to get done.
How many students have signed up for online learning?
I don't know as of today. I believe as of Friday there were approximately 250 district-wide.
And that's from K through 12, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How often will students be washing hands and or be offered hand sanitizer?
Very frequently. We will need to work into our schedules, into our procedures, frequent hand washing opportunities for our students, particularly before and after recess, particularly before and after lunch. And then hand sanitizer will be available throughout the school day in many locations. One of the things we're looking at currently is putting hand sanitizer dispensers outside every classroom door.
If my child wants to try in-person learning and decides the restrictions, I'm guessing with the masks or what have you, are too much, can they switch to online easily, or do they have to wait until the semester is over once they start in-person learning?
Due to the need to staff these positions, we need to see how many students are going to sign up to know how many teachers we can dedicate to those positions. So we're going to have a commitment from parents one way or the other, and then can reassess that need at semester time. So they would need to make a decision if they want to go online or in person.
So to clarify, if parents work during the day, is your child still eligible for online learning, just primarily working through the evenings and maybe the weekends and catching teachers live when we can? Is that okay?
Yes.
I
would add to that teacher connection is extremely important, and I would encourage parents to look at those model schedules and to try to work into that the opportunity for their child to connect directly with their classroom teacher.
We talked about this. Families can start the year online, and they're in the second semester they are allowed to switch back to in-person learning. Face shields are not acceptable substitutes for masks. Again, I think you've answered this. If a child starts in school and go back to online, we're asking them to do it at the end of the semester. Will students be required to sit in class for a full class day with a mask in the heat? Basically, you've kind of touched on that.
And again, for those who have joined us late, Mr. Fong is going to go through these Facebook chats and add these questions to our frequently asked questions document. So some of these questions are being asked multiple times, and rather than answer them multiple times, we're going to put this video online. We're going to have the frequently asked questions online. So if you don't hear an answer to your question, please refer to those. And that's because they've already been asked.
Will there be an orientation of some kind, especially freshmen and seventh graders?
Yes. It is important that we have orientations for students, especially when they're transitioning to different buildings. That is one of those things we'll have to figure out how that looks this school year. There's still a significant amount of work to do. The start of the school year, if you haven't heard, has been changed to September 8th for students. And we have a lot of work to do this August for figuring out how to still provide those opportunities for our families and for our students, for orientations and those kinds of things in a safe way. So parents should expect to see more coming from their building principals about that. We're going to be getting those principals together very soon, next week actually, to begin working on those things. So there will be much more information coming out on that as well.
You said high school students may take some classes online and still take some classes at the school. Is that also going to be available at the Troy Junior High School?
Yes. Now, the caveat to that is we won't be able to transport those students. We can transport in our morning routes and our evening routes, but if a student is going to have some kind of hybrid schedule, they would have to have transportation for that.
So it would be fine for first period of the day and last period of the day, we could offer some transportation, but if it's just fourth period, their parents are going to have to be in charge of...
Yeah, we can't have continual busing throughout the school day.
What is the plan for choir concerts and choir class in general?
That's one of the big questions ahead of us. We aren't quite sure what band or choir are going to look like. I haven't seen any guidance yet from health professionals. I have read a few things about that, and I know that the professional music associations are trying to work through that as well. The challenge with a choir class is that students are typically shoulder to shoulder on risers and singing loudly, which emits more particles into the air, I guess you could call it. The same thing holds true with band. So we are still trying to figure out what those look like and have some decisions to make there.
Will substitute teachers continue to travel from building to building?
If the schedule, if they're working for if they're taking the place of a teacher who travels from building to building, then they would be traveling from building to building. I think that's the question that's being asked. Different substitutes also work in different buildings on different days. Yes?
Yes. If my daughter signs up for Latin, is it available online? We're just going to have to see how many students sign up for Latin. Can we send personal hand sanitizer with our kids to have it readily available to them?
Yes.
Choir concerts. What if we're unable to find substitute teachers for teachers who are out sick?
That happens currently, and we'll have to adjust and figure out how to supervise those students in each building daily. And this already happens very infrequently, but if we are understaffed, we may have to shut down a building for a day.
What is the district's approach to courses that depend on shared tools and materials? Science, chemistry, beakers, art, paintbrushes, those types of things.
If students are sharing materials, we're either going to have to sanitize them or put them on a shelf for a period of time. Last I heard from Miami County Public Health was that the virus could not survive more than 72 hours, even in ideal laboratory conditions, which means that's the longest it could survive. So for example, students who check books out from a library, if they bring those books back to the library, we would leave them on a shelf, not touched by anyone else for 72 hours, and then put them back into circulation to ensure that they were safe. So there are some things we can do to make sure that our materials and supplies are safe, and we would also try to find ways to limit the sharing of those kinds of things.
Please address whether a child, especially an elementary and or special needs student, who for whatever reason cannot handle in person and wishes to do online mid-semester.
I wasn't sure what the question was. Yes.
Would they be allowed, if there was a special situation involving specifically an elementary or special needs student who could not handle in-person learning, would there be option available to switch even if it's not at the end of the semester?
Students with special needs have an individualized education plan. So if that learning model wasn't working for them, they could reconvene the IEP team to look at an alternate placement.
But that would not be. But they also asked about just elementary and students in general, whether they would be allowed to switch mid-semester if it's not working for them.
Again, no, because we have to staff these positions. That is a considerable hurdle that we have to figure out for the school district, and that is why we need a commitment to know how many students are going to go online. We have to know how many students we have so that we can get those teachers in those positions, and we just simply cannot change staffing positions in midstream.
Many colleges are not having their students return after Thanksgiving and plan to have them return in January. Will Troy City Schools have this approach as well, or is Christmas break schedule going to be the same as it always is?
Christmas break schedule is the same as it always is. What colleges have to consider is that their students leave the college campus and spread out across the country and then come back. That's why they're doing what they're doing.
Yes, students will be able to participate in any and all extracurricular activities. Yes, they can still do that. Yes, we will be busing students from the Career Center. Online Academy is semester by semester. Yes, it will be offered for an entire year if that's what if that's what they choose. What if a student has COVID and had COVID and is now immune from it? Do they still have to wear a mask? Isn't this everyone has to wear a mask unless we receive written documentation from a medical professional?
Yes, anyone who has a doctor's note that says they don't need to wear a mask for whatever reason would not have to wear a mask. So if a student had COVID, they should talk to their primary care physician to ask that question. Otherwise, they're required to wear a face covering.
Preschool plan, we do not operate the Miami County preschool. That's through the Miami County ESC.
Right.
You might want to touch base with them. I'm getting a little behind now. 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. Is that going to happen?
We certainly hope so. It's a spring trip, so there's a lot of time between now and then. It's impossible to determine today what that's going to look like. We certainly hope that the infection rate in our area and across the country goes down. If it were to spike or go up, that trip may be in jeopardy. We'll work with that company and those families to establish an alternative time for that trip to happen.
When is kindergarten screening, and how is it going to work?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure when kindergarten screening is. I think there's information on our website that includes that, or if not, we'll make sure it gets on there. I'm going to add that question to my list. And then what's it going to look like? Again, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I know we have some people working on that process to make sure it's safe and welcoming for our families. That will also be on our website.
With blended learning, and if kids are quarantined, will they have a live teacher at home?
With blended learning?
Yes. Or if a kid gets quarantined, will they have the opportunity to access a live teacher while they are at home?
Well, I certainly think that we need to provide access. Those are two different questions, I think. If we have blended learning, that means we've shifted into that model of instruction. So the answer is yes, that students would have access to their teachers, maybe not every day, but certainly the days they're in school and probably on Wednesdays as well. The other days they would have access to the materials, and live access, I don't know, but there is access. So students can email teachers currently. There's collaborative tools throughout Canvas to allow them to communicate. If students are in quarantine and assigned to a regular classroom, then yes, our teachers will need to work with our families and our students to make sure that their questions get answered as well.
If you don't hear me read your quote, we're starting to get a lot of repeats now that we've been going for almost an hour. So if you don't hear me ask it, either go back earlier in the video. We'll also have an FAQ ready at some point, likely tomorrow after we get more questions. Tonight, well, are we going to require / ask teachers to be tested for COVID at any point? Is that in our plans?
We have no plans to require people to be tested at this point.
Special needs students who are unable to wear a mask, we will need a doctor's note, not a parent's note, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do we, with online classes, how many hours a day do we need? I mean, obviously it'll probably depend on the student, the age, and the coursework they're taking, but do we have any sort of estimate how many hours they will be required to be online per day?
No, each student is so different. They're going to have access to the learning materials, again, whether those are videos, articles to read, websites to visit. So each student is so different in how much time it takes them to do things. But what's going to be consistent for students is the time designated for live access, live interaction with their teachers.
What about classes that require hands-on learning, such as biology for dissections and such? Is that being taught online too? Like a chemistry class where they do an experiment or something like that? Will that be taught online as well?
If it's a fully online option, I think that's what the question is asking. Will that class be offered as an online class? Again, we don't know at this point until we see what our student numbers look like.
Right.
There are different options for access to those kinds of courses. There are some canned curriculum that students could take. I'm not sure if those are the best option, but those are available. And if, again, we have a significant number of students sign up that want to take chemistry online, then we need to work to try to provide that.
Will online kids be able to go to clubs like Future Begins Today? Yes, all extra. What about GATE? Talk about our gifted learning program. I don't think we've touched on that. Mm-hmm. How will that look for students?
I don't know specifically how it will look. We're working with our gifted services coordinator on that. And again, those services are going to be driven by how many students. The answer remains the same in that we need to provide personalized learning for our students. Whether they're gifted students, special education students, English language learners, we need to meet them where they are and provide those services. So without knowing specifically how school is going to look for how many kids it's going to look that way, we can't determine today what it's going to look like. But no, those students will have services provided.
You touched on this. Students who participate in after-school activities such as sports and band, they will be required to do their own transportation. Will all teachers be utilizing Zoom? My child's school didn't last year, and she missed out on that teacher and peer interaction.
I don't know about the tool. It could be Zoom. There may be tools built into Canvas that allow that to happen, but there will be live interaction with teachers.
Since online classes will be reassessed for the second semester, I plan to do online school for the entire year, no matter what the COVID spread situation is. Can we be guaranteed that online learning will be continued for the entire year, not just the first semester?
Yes.
Can we, okay. Again, if I'm skipping some of your questions, it's because we've answered them. I would encourage you to go back and watch from the beginning or check our FAQ, which will be available. How will state testing be done?
I don't know that state testing will be done. If it's done, it's currently done in school on computers. I don't see that really changing. We may have to think about those procedures, but it would still happen. Unless it doesn't happen.
Has the school looked into personal air conditioning units for each classroom? They only cost $100, and I'm sure parents would be happy to chip in.
Our electrical capacity in our buildings cannot handle individual classroom air conditioners. So no, that's not an option for us.
Is online school going to start when school starts? Yes, it will start on September 8th.
Yes, our online school would follow the same calendar as our normal school.
Will each school be putting out more specifics, as things will be slightly different from each building for each building's circumstance?
Yes. Yes, schools will be, everyone should expect to see additional communication coming from their building principal about their school. We'll all be following the same calendar, the same model of instruction, but things are going to look a little bit different depending on the school you're in.
We do not know what the UVC schedule is or when they will start. We believe their plan is coming out soon, though. Will water fountains be available? Do students need to bring their own water bottles, and will there be some place to refill?
That's a good question. No, water fountains will not be available. We are putting bottle fillers in all of our buildings. So students should bring a water bottle, and they would have the ability to fill those water bottles up throughout the school day. The bubbler drinking fountains aren't safe with COVID, so that's why we're going to the bottle fillers. And that's something we're installing this summer in all of our buildings.
A lot of questions about the water bottles. My child has been a part of the Reading Help program. Would that kind of help be available online?
I don't know what the Reading Help program is.
Okay.
I'll have to find out about that.
Do we know when? Obviously, July 31st is the cutoff. Do we know when what classes will be available online and in person will be released?
Yeah, any parent who signs up for the online academy will be contacted via email or directly to share with them what that schedule would look like or what classes are available. Again, it becomes trickier at the high school and junior high levels based on our just the variety of course offerings we have. So again, we're going to have to look at what those requests are and then determine what classes can be offered completely online, which ones cannot, and contacting those parents to share that information.
Lunch, we've addressed earlier. May want to no. If they have a doctor's note to switch mid-semester, can a student switch mid-semester?
Doctors don't determine where students go to school.
Yes. Lunch, face shields, 8th grade trip. Yes, online academy is guaranteed for the entire year. For those kids who are doing in-person learning, if we get to level 4 and everything goes online, will those kids have the same teacher as they have in school?
Yes.
We talked about gifted learning. Just trying to catch up. There's a lot of the same stuff going on. Why did the district decide to follow the color code system even though the governor said it wasn't necessary? What is the rationale for kids wearing masks even though there is no evidence anything to help anything and could actually be detrimental? Why make kids suffer in a mask?
We are following the advice of experts. I will refer again to the guidance documents that were developed for schools that informed us how to create our school return plans. It is explicitly clear in that guidance from the Ohio Department of Education, the Ohio Department of Health, and the American Academy of Pediatrics that social distancing and face coverings are an important part of our mitigation strategy. That is why we chose to do that. They were not directly required by the governor prior to, but it was very clear that that was the right thing to do. We are not required to follow the color coding system because the governor was going to allow that to be local decisions. Different districts are doing different things, but our Board of Education chose this plan because we think it reacts effectively to local conditions. It allows us to have different plans of attack based on the local infection rate and finds the right balance between keeping our students and staff safe versus the inherent benefit of being in school.
Last spring, particularly I believe the junior high and elementary levels, they didn't receive letter grades. If we go to the blended learning model, I guess, can we expect letter grades all year long this year?
Yes, students will receive their typical grades this year.
Will any of this change high school graduation requirements?
The state has changed some high school graduation requirements. For example, because there wasn't state testing last year, the students who missed those required state tests will not have to take those. The grades they receive in those courses will be the substitute for those test scores. So there are some changes to high school graduation requirements. There is more local control as a result, and that could remain fluid if the state doesn't test this year. So for the last several years, the state has changed graduation requirements, and I don't expect that to stop now.
Will there be information to send out to help us let us know what's going on with the online academy? Yes.
Yes.
Is there anywhere to review the online platform / material ahead of time? www.k12.oh.us or troycityschools.org. We have an entire section on what we anticipate the online learning looking like as much as we can.
This presentation is on our website. It has a link to that document that also includes the registration link. So anyone who is listening that hasn't chosen that option and is interested should go there to learn more and to register if that's what they want to do.
I understand gate services will be offered. Will it still be in person and 1 day a week at Forest? What will happen on a hybrid model with gate?
I don't have those answers today. That's one of the things that we're working on. It certainly won't happen in person for students who are learning completely online.
How do I sign up for online? Again, www.troy.k12.oh.us. You provided sample schedules for choosing online academy. Is there truly flexibility for families?
I'll refer to my earlier answer where part of the learning that a student will engage in if they choose the online option will be asynchronous, meaning they can access that at any time, be it articles, websites, teacher videos. Those will be able to be accessed anytime. What needs to be scheduled is that live interaction with the teacher.
Here's something we haven't touched on. They just want to make sure they thought they read this. If we are closed due to weather, will kids do online learning that day instead of having the day off?
Yes. Again, we have to remain flexible throughout this year for rolling closures in separate buildings based on infections, for basically any scenario. And since all of our students will have Chromebooks this year and should take those between school and home, learning really has to be seamless between home and school as much as possible. So if we have a calamity day, yes, they would be an online learning day for students.
College Credit Plus classes, will those be available online? Again, will that depend on how many people sign up?
Well, I'm not sure if the universities have already determined that or if they're still working on that, but I'm not sure about College Credit Plus classes. That is part of the communication that the parents should expect to hear from the building principal once we know that.
Is there any thought to assigning subs to buildings to lessen the spread, like 3 teachers who would only sub at Kyle or 3 who would only sub at Cookson, etc., etc.?
We will look at any option that works. finding subs is often a challenge for schools, and we expect it to be that. So this year, we had to remain flexible with our sub plans.
If we sign our kids up for online and then decide we don't like the plan for the type of classes offered, can we decide to go to in-person learning before school starts? So if a family signs up on July 31st and we release the plans, or we release all the classes available on, say, August 10th or what have you, can they pull out of the online academy that they've signed up for and go to in-person?
We want to be as accommodating and flexible as we can with any and all parents and students. However, the big challenge ahead of us is staffing these positions. So we need a commitment from parents to decide. And once again, the deciding factor about whether to choose online versus in-person learning should be based on the health concerns that each family faces. We're certainly doing everything we can to make sure that the return to school in person is safe for our students and for our staff, but there are some inherent risks that we just cannot eliminate completely. So if the fear of those risks it should be the driving factor. It is the health status and the condition of that family and that student. So is online learning the best option for them health-wise? If so, then choose that. If it is not, then if there are no underlying health conditions, certainly the best learning environment is going to be having students in school. So we're just trying to balance that need between student staff safety versus the benefit of being in school. Parents should make their decision based on that, not just what course is offered. Again, this is particularly challenging at the high school level, which is why we know that we can't offer every single course online with a live teacher every day. That's just going to be, there are too many courses offered at the high school to accomplish that. What we are trying to do is get the number of students who are interested in taking those online courses, particularly at the high school and junior high, to determine what sections of classes we could offer that are online. If we had hundreds of students in the high school that wanted to take those courses, then we would be able to assign full-time staff members to do that. If we don't, and it's just a handful, then we're going to have to figure out how that looks. And that will probably be an individual phone call or connection or communication to each of those families to look at their child's schedule and say, here's what's possible, here's what you may have to not take this year because we simply can't offer it online. We can't today make those decisions until we see how many students are interested in that option.
Obviously, K through 3 kids can't do online learning on their own, assuming they choose to go online. I was basically sitting with them the entire time and teaching them last spring. They were not able to do it on their own. Kids whose parents aren't helping them, will they be failed or held back?
We very, very seldom do we retain students. I won't say it never happens, but very seldom do we do that, particularly for the younger grade levels. If students may fail courses if they don't complete the academic work or demonstrate mastery of it, so I can't say that we won't have any students who fail, but our objective is to provide the best learning opportunity for all of our kids in whatever situation and model we happen to be in. If they're fully online, then we need to make that the best learning opportunity we can for them, with quality content, with direct teacher connection, and supporting them as much as possible. Again, that's easier when it's in-person learning, but if it's online, we need to make every effort to make that a high-quality product.
Will students get out of school an hour early at the end of the quarter, as they have in the past?
Yes.
At the end of the quarter, okay. If kids are drinking from water bottles, obviously they have to take off their masks. Will they be allowed to drink from their water bottles if they're within 6 feet of another person?
Yes. They can move their mask to the side to take a drink of water and then put it back on.
Is the teacher going to be responsible for ensuring the kindergarten kids have their Chromebooks with them when they leave school every day? Or are you really going to hold a 5-year-old responsible for this every day?
Our teachers work with our students today to make sure they have the materials they need to take home with them. They'll continue to do that.
Online Academy, again, with so many details unknown, why is the deadline so fast? That's just so we can make sure that we have proper staffing for those positions. How will gym class work?
We don't know that currently, but we're working with our PE teachers and our principals to design that.
Okay. Believe it or not, I think we are currently at the end of our questions. Is there anything more in the presentation you want to go to?
I think we went through it all. I would encourage people to go to our website and to check out the full blueprint. There's much more detail there about what happens if someone has symptoms, what happens if someone tests positive. There's more detail about our cleaning procedures. So check out those resources online and know that we continue to answer many questions. I referred to this earlier, like we have a sanitation and cleaning task force who is working on classroom cleaning procedures, what that's going to look like, what products we're going to use. So there are so many things that we still are considering with a return to school. But we have a great team here working on it, and I know that we'll have a really quality product, and we're very anxious for our students to come back to school this year. We know that they're anxious to get back as well, at least the ones I've talked to. So we hope everybody has a safe and happy rest of the summer, and we look forward to seeing you early September.
How will Chromebooks be distributed? We're still working on that. We lack a lot of information here. We absolutely do. We have not got to, we would again encourage our full, I believe it's an 8-page blueprint is online. We didn't get to all of it in this video presentation because of time constraints. We would ask you to go www.k12.oh.us to view our full blueprint. You can also find it at troycityschools.org. So yes, we did not get to everything that's in the plan because it's an 8-page plan, and we want to leave plenty of time for your questions. So if we didn't get to yours, or if you think we missed yours, check earlier in the video. This video will be posted, and we're also going to have an FAQ online from the questions that we gathered from here. We thank you for your time this morning, and if you missed it or you want to see it again, we will be back at 7 o'clock tonight.
And as always, feel free to email us with questions. You can email info@troycityschools.org. As Mr. Fong recommended, go to our website or call us with questions.
Go Trojans.
Have a good day.